everyone. I hope you can hear me, and I also want to express appreciation for the previous two readers whose work I've greatly enjoyed. I'm going to start off slightly tactlessly, perhaps, by giving a couple of poems about the awfulness of poetry reading. The first one is, in a way, not from the point of view of, but about someone who's very famous and goes round from university to university reading his poems. Visitant. Despite the snow banked high to ice, the parking lot was jammed with cars the day the former poet laureate came flying into town, first class. Twilight. Somewhere in the sky that's bigger than America, the blue-grey calf-skin leather creaks soft against his neck and soft beneath his palms. The airplane slowly turns, banks into its leisurely decline toward another city's lights, its suburbs twinkling. It will not be long until he'll stand rehearsing someone else's lines, written long ago when he was someone else. These days he never writes. The second piece is written from the point of view of someone who's attending a poetry reading and wishes to hell that he or she were somewhere else. And the opening line is from a reading that I've heard. I was actually attending. The piece is written from the point of view of a hypocrite and a prig, so of course it's not autobiographical. The piece is called Self-Dislike at a Poetry Reading. This next one's a prose poem, he declares, and I think, what were all the others then? and scan the audience a second time, less hopefully, for girls. Meanwhile, threatening interminability, the preamble, undistinguishable, I presume, from what's to come, if come it ever does, anacondas round the staling room between the rows of institution chairs and regulars upon the institution chairs, or some of them, and no one's listening apparently, and once again the churlish, energetic loneliness takes hold. There's a bar just down the street. There is indeed a bar just down the street, and I could be there expansively to contemplate the art that is a pint of Guinness, soupy, long and dark. Instead, I reason with myself that I'm here for poetry, to get a sense of what is going on around these parts. I do not tell myself that I am here for love, nor admit how often my mishearings prove the germs of poems of my own. No trace of debt, which in my tidy moleskin I secrete for the hours when I am not on edge upon a hardening chair in one small room that's filling with my prayers. But when he's finished, I applaud. I applaud, I tell you, I applaud. The next piece, for the next piece, there's only one word I might need to explain. It's Old French and it's pétarade, and that means a string of farts. The poem is a sentimental effort. You wouldn't really call it a poem, called In Memory of My Grandfather. Older people, so I hear, must take their time in standing up, themselves must edge to the edge of the chair, and breathing deeply, let the upper thighs, but never the susceptible back, do the lifting slowly and with care. But my grandfather, even if he knew all this, did not give a tuppenny stuff, but did the lot with brio, speed, panache, drew high his knees, rocked back and forth on his bent spine, a pendulum gone mad, until with dervish vigour he would coil, sickling from his armchair's depths to land on his astonished feet. and curving like a human letter C or crescent moon, arthritic nature vive, he'd there let fly a most explosive fart. You mustn't laugh, my mother said, for I was in convulsions. This is how older people get. You'll be like this yourself someday. Oh, I do hope so, I straight replied. The matter was, at that stage, dropped. It was, however, not to be ignored. What a test it was of politesse for my grandparents' early evening friends, just Betty and my Uncle Bob, in fact, to watch this ritual enacted, especially as, I joy to report, my grandfather would apostrophize the fart. "Get out, you pay no rent," he'd shout. And I would chant that home is where the fart is, or yelp "Gone with the wind" as he strode out, hailing him laureate of posterior verse, bum sonneteer extraordinaire, a voice that's all his own, etc. My world's been dumb of levity like this for over 20 years. I knew that if I were to ruminate on what he left, the books in which he never wrote his name, the table lighter with defective flint, which he always said he'd change tomorrow, the pocket slide rule in its perspex sleeve with instructions yellowing to this day, I would fashion from my missing him untruth, a listlessness he never felt. And so, instead, I choose to celebrate the petarades, those volleyed trumpetings which sounded clear as joy throughout my youth, with him who took all jokes against himself, and knew in mirth a boy's unspoken love. The next piece about a bird concerns the fact that when herons take off and land, they look very different from when they're soaring in the air, a fact that pleases me greatly every time I see them. Heron. Fear, ferocity, astonishment in one maddish eye of yours from Audubon, beneath a few spiked feathers for a crest. Thin, rain-coated William Burroughs of a bird, stalking hypodermically, toe-deep in shingle, or shallows of a stream. But on the wing, shouldering off with 6 great languid flaps, all bird book posturing, you rise magisterial. World stills to background as you soar down the evening path and deign as yours, sternly to master. And all the tumblers, acrobats, all the gauzy zoomers of the air dull themselves to baubles, gauds, drawing not one scrape of syllable from you as in your slaty glide you rule, one grey line unwavering between the earth and sky. In the Vondelpark, Amsterdam, and the old dogs toddling after their owners, while the whippersnappers come snuffle barging in on your attentions, proffering the absurdity of themselves to you, calm at last on your curved wooden bench. Every 6 years or so you come back here, put up at the same hotel in the Anna van den Vondelstraat, around the corner from the Vondelkerk's slatted graphite spike of a spire. And after breakfast let the long paths and pathways of the Vondelpark take you strolling, skirting the ponds with their dabbling, puttering, squabbling waterfowl, while others pass. Track-suited, iPodded girls, cyclists at ease, the dogged, jog-plodding old. And gathered into these, yet separate, again you ponder how remarkable it is that here, without your stir, everything at its accordant pace recedes unobtrusively into focus. In the reeds, the movement of a whitened branch delineates a heron hidden from your eyes, until with smooth hydraulic glide of neck and needling head into its shoulder blades, it draws forward to the edge of memory, makes real the illustration you thrilled at as a child in that book of birds, and thrill at still in warish adulthood, the hunched grimness on stilts, the bristling austerity. And gradually, one by one, the old joys that were never truly gone return themselves deep in the green heart of a foreign city. And in quiet exhilaration you stroll round again, wondering how you got it all so wrong for so many years. I have a very good editor here. I entitled this next poem Ashtabula, which he changed to Ashtabula, Ohio, presumably thinking that no one knew where Ashtabula was. However, a singer whom certain librarians not far from here say can't sing a note, he quotes the word Ashtabula in his poem You're Gonna Leave Me, You're Gonna Make Me Lonesome When You Go, from the album Blood on the Tracks, rhyming it as only Bob Dylan can with Honolulu. But it's where I now live and work, and the poem's called Ashtabula, Ohio. This town is raw. The waitresses smoke and get hard-faced young. With the red tarpaulin of a tablecloth ridging my legs above the knees, I'm tracing Ginger Baker's part in the Muzak's badge. The one before was Do It Again. I'm pondering how small a grain it takes of discontent to swell into a hell of anywhere that's just itself, as this town is. Its brickish street with 6 old bars. One used to be a chandler's, but it failed. And factories drawn up nearby, purifying chlorine through great sheets of mercury and flaring in a dark that's darker still beneath the stars far out above the lake, on which some dry as dust cartographer has inked a staggered path, the unstaked out frontier where great America, her massive drape of land at last, exhausted, slackens and expires. I sense the starlings squabbling, wheezing into yet another spring, as I sit waiting for the Irish former dean who hired me 20 years ago when things were desperate. I do not forget. I have lived here happier, longer and more happily than anywhere. In my polished glass, sunlight scintillates. The waitress comes up, asks me if I taught her aunt 7 years ago, or what it ate. I'm English, as you can perhaps tell, and I'd never seen a chipmunk before, or a groundhog, or a raccoon, or a fire hydrant. Next piece is called Hydrant and joins the pantheon of hydrant verse, no doubt. That's enough of that sort of fantasy.
I have a hydrant one.
We'll have it. I entitled this imaginatively Hydrant. Tenderly they came, the great machines clawing up the earth. I walked out, asked the men in the wet trench they'd scraped across my yard if they'd like some coffee, if they'd struck gold yet. We laughed like drains at that. Next morning they were gone, but he had arrived, young Master Hydrant, egg yolk ochre with a grapefruit squeezer dome of a hat and bright red mittens to match. How fond I grew of him so soon, this upstart sprout, so spick and span, so unseasonably spry, catching my eye as all that year, college immatured into a peevish toy, waspish even further past belief. But he won't brook a moment's bitterness from me. He always looks as if he's just about to skip to hemisphere that chain of his, from both bolts of his stumpy amputated arms clean over his head for joy. Oh yes, he has the air about him as he stands there, giving the finger to self-pity and malingering. I could have written the next piece, I suppose, in Turkey, where I lived for a few years, where the power was off more than it was on, but it goes off quite a lot in Ashtabula, and this piece is written from the point of view of someone in winter in a power cut, so I suspect some of you can relate to that fairly well. It's called Return of Power. And you know what it's like when it comes back, at least I imagine you know what it comes like when it's back, and also you know what it's like when it's off. Return of Power. Instantly afraid, I hear my own voice downstairs, announcing my name to no one in the dark, and yes, it's back. Returned, renewed, restored, but what are words to such a fact? Controllable fire. The slowly chilling box that holds me, shivering in my robe, beneath the comforter fist forced around my throat, now glows capillaried with evenness. Refrigerator hums. The vents exhale with urgent calm. There are no greater musics in the world. Thank you very much indeed for listening to me.